So this week, of course, I am going to continue with the series of studies that I have started. I started a couple of weeks ago, which I have entitled The Mother of All Wars. Before I progress a little further, I was a little negligent because I noticed that there is somebody in the room that I'm seeing for the first time. I don't think I can pronounce the name. It's Makchape Lupia. Makchape Lupia. I know if I saw that name before, I would not have forgotten. So I'm sure I'm seeing it for the first time. I think it's Lupia. I'm not sure if this is somebody, what country this is, but I want you to know that we are pleased to have you with us. And we hope you will be blessed today. Do you want to just unmute and say something about yourself? All right, if not, that is okay as well. So we're happy to have you with us. All right, so as I was saying, we started our study on the mother of all wars a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sort of excited about these studies because, to be honest, in these studies, I am planning to go through the teachings and the ideas that I believe are the most important in the Christian understanding of the universe and of the world and of the Bible and of our purpose and of the plan of salvation. I want to go through, that's what I'm planning to go through. And as I said, I'm taking my time because I want to make sure that we get a proper understanding of how everything fits together. Sometimes you take one doctrine by itself, like the doctrine, for example, of the one God. I know that there are so many brethren who are fixated on the doctrine of the one God, which is a wonderful truth and very necessary for us to understand. But if you don't connect it, if you don't connect it to the other truths that are a part of our faith, after a while it becomes vacuous and meaningless, and you start to wonder, what is the point? Okay, you can prove the point. Where does it take us? The beautiful thing I've learned in my years as a Christian is that every truth that is really important, it connects to another perfectly, like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And at the end, something extraordinarily beautiful appears. And that is what I would like to do in these studies, to show how everything fits together, to make this amazing tapestry, this beautiful picture. So I am going to start this morning by doing a little bit of a revision on what we did last week, and I'm going to be using my images and my Bible back and forth. So as I said, I want us all to regard this as a Bible study and not so much a sermon. When I am trying to preach a sermon, I have something in mind, I have a time frame, I have things I have to cover. But we are doing a Bible study, which means that I'm not going to be rushed, and I'm not going to determine how far we proceed. Wherever we reach at the end of the time, that's where we're going to stop until next week. But anyway, let me start by doing a revision of what we looked at last week. And last week, we looked at an understanding of sin that I would say it's not widely understood, but I think most of us understand. And we looked at the fact that the universe, when it was in a sinless state, there was a reason for this sinless state. Very important. There was a reason. When you find that something is without sin, when you find a state or a place that is without sin, it doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen because everybody is just strong and determined and everybody fights hard. No. When you find a place that is without sin, the only reason in the universe is because God is all and God is in all. That's the only reason why there's no sin. And we understand this because Jesus told us very clearly that there is only one good, and that is God. In Revelation 15 and verse 4, I believe it says that thou only art holy. So we get this message in the Bible. Without God, there's no goodness. Without God, there's only sin. Without God, there's no holiness. And what we saw is that sin existed. Sin came into existence because somebody divided the universe in two. And when we say he divided the universe, we don't mean that he took an instrument and made a physical division. What Lucifer did was he brought a philosophical division. Maybe you could call it a doctrinal division. But what Lucifer introduced was the idea that there could be good without God. Lucifer introduced the idea that it was not safe to trust God and it was not safe to allow God to be in intimate connection with you. If you don't trust God, then of course you don't want to be with him. So the universe was divided into two. And this is the great truth, the great foundation truth that explains everything else. Where God is, there is holiness and righteousness. Where God is feared and avoided, there is unhappiness and sin and all that is dark. Some people think of these two conditions and they think that if you're on the good side, what it means is that if you try to be good and if you fight against evil and if you work hard to improve, you can get on the good side. That is nonsense. And they think that you get on the bad side because you start doing wrong things and because you follow evil people. That is nonsense. I say to all of us that we need to repudiate and utterly reject that false idea, which lays the foundation of legalism and superstition. Just remember, this is the key thing. The only way to be good and to possess good and to live in a good atmosphere is to find God. There's no other way, and any other method will only lead to frustration. On the other side, the only reason why a person is wicked and evil and why there's no good in the person's life is simply because he doesn't have God. That is it. So that's what we looked at last week. And then we saw that God had a dilemma, God had a problem. And we need to understand this problem. First of all, what Satan attacked was the character of God. He brought about this division that we just looked at. He caused God to be feared and he caused God to be avoided because he created the idea that God was somebody that you could not trust. And where we saw that God is not able to defend himself personally against an attack on his character. I mean, he can say, I'm not that kind of person, but that is not enough of a defense. And where you lose trust in God, what happens? You lose fellowship. That's point number 2. Because when you don't trust a person, you don't remain with that person. And when you lose fellowship with God, what you lose is God's government, God's way of governing you, your life, of being in control of you. You lose this, and so you are left to yourself. And so point number 4, if you lose God's government, you lose peace and harmony, and you lose the ability to do what is right. And the result is, point number 5, you have not only a sinful, miserable person, you have a sinful, miserable universe. So this is the problem of sin. This is a problem that exists in the universe. The other thing that we saw was that when in dealing with this problem, what options did God have? If you have people who don't trust you and they don't want to be with you, what is God going to do? I mean, he could have destroyed everybody and the problem would have been solved, but it wouldn't have been solved because the lie would have remained. The questions about God would have remained. So God had to find a way to solve it. But in the meantime, how do you preserve order in the universe? God has to preserve order. Point number one, he has to keep order. He has to find a way to restore the universe, but in the meantime, he has to keep order. And how do you keep order in a place where people don't trust you and they don't want you? How do you keep order? What he has to do is to overrule your power to choose. He takes away your choice. He doesn't allow you to make choices. In a way, yes, it's still there, but what he has to do now is he has to govern by compulsion. And by compulsion, I mean he has to make rules now. He has to make strict rules, and he has to demand that you obey those rules. And if you don't, point number 4, there are strict penalties. So that is what we saw why God introduced the system of the law. When men left God, as Paul says, the law is not made for a righteous person. The law is made for those who are outside of God. And those who are outside of God, God still has to keep them under discipline. He has to keep their unruliness in check. And so he gave the law and he gave strict penalties. So that's what we looked at last week. Now, the true solution was not the giving of the law. The true solution is that there needed to be an unmistakable revelation of God's character. Why? Because God has to answer Satan. The root of the problem is that he eroded trust in God. That's what Satan did. And so that is a problem that has to be fixed above every other problem. I hope these points are sticking in our minds, brothers and sisters, because the solution above everything else is the revelation of God's character. That's number one. Number two, there needed to be proof that God's government system works. All right, we trust God, we go back to God. What happens? God comes to live inside of us. Does this system work? That's the second thing that God has to prove. And the third thing that God has to do, he has to find a way to save the victims. We who are victims of this fracture in the universe, God has to find a way to save us. But not just to save us, but to save us justifiably. That means he has to do it while remaining fair to the devil, to Satan, and to the claims that he made. God has to do this in a way that everybody can say it is fair and it is just. So this is the problem before God, and this is the solution. This is the only way it can be solved. And this is what we want to look at as we proceed in this series of studies. Now, today we are going to move on to the next, let me say the next element, the next thing that we need to understand. And so today I want to talk about corporate identity. And even a little bit more, I will say corporate identity and sin. I want to look at this topic as it relates to the problem of sin. Now, first of all, I want to define what do we mean when we say identity. The phrase is something that I think we understand, but we're just going to make sure that we look at it a little more closely to make sure that we don't have any misconceptions about what we are talking about. Now, first of all, identity. According to the Oxford Dictionary, identity is who or what a person is, a person or a thing. Who or what? Who are you? Or what are you? I mean, even if you are a dog or you're a cat, identity still is relevant. In our case, we would say who. Okay? So identity means who are you? And I suppose depending on the context, you can have several different answers. You know, there is a craziness going on in the world right now where men are identifying as women and women are identifying as men, and some are identifying as cats. Some are identifying as birds. I know there's even one big oversized man in his 50s who's identifying as a baby. And some of these people really need psychiatric help, and some of them just need a proper old-time flogging. But anyway, this word identity has become a major talking point these days because of that kind of craziness. But we want to look at it in a little bit more sober way this morning. I mean, generally, when you talk about a person's identity, what we look at is the nationality of the person, the age of the person, the country where the person lives, maybe the race of the person. A few things like this really give us an idea of of the identity of the person. But what we really mean is we want to understand the background and the nature, certain things about the person. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, another dictionary, it says it's the distinguishing character. It says basically the same thing, but it highlights it a little bit more, expands on it a little. It is who a person is, or it is the distinguishing character. You know, I have, let us say, for example, I had a twin brother. My identity is different from his, but what makes my identity different? Usually, when you meet upon twins, you start trying to find out, how can I know this one different from the other? Sometimes it's just that there are inflections in the voice. Sometimes one has a little mark somewhere. And after you get to know them very well, you begin to pick up quite easily who is who, because the resemblance is not perfect. The only place you have perfect resemblance is in God and his son. And then that again is character. It's not necessarily the outward appearance. So identity really refers to the distinguishing character. How can you identify, how can you point out one person different from another? And there is a third element I want to add. If you look at the definition from Wikipedia, it adds something. It says it's the qualities, the beliefs, the personality traits. Basically, we saw that already. The appearance and or expressions, but it adds something now that characterize a person or a group. Now, mark that point. When you talk about identity, you're not just talking to an individual. According to the Oxford and the Merriam-Webster, it's focusing on a person or individual. But Wikipedia gives us a little bit more, and it says it can refer to the identity of a person as well as a group. And you can understand that, because I could say my identity is a Jamaican. Some of these crazy people who are talking about identity today, they're identifying themselves as transgenders. They belong to a certain identity. They identify themselves as LGBTQIA and all the rest of it. They put themselves in another category and they identify themselves. They bond themselves together in a certain group. And that also gives them a certain kind of identity. Now, let's move on to look at the word corporate, which is just a little bit expanding on what the Wikipedia says. It says corporate, according to the Oxford Dictionary, it means that it is shared by a whole group. So that's what the word corporate means. If you look at what Wikipedia says, it characterizes a person or a group. And here, you just add the word corporate to emphasize that point. It is shared by a whole group and not just a single member. So we don't really have a membership structure in this fellowship, but I could say that in a way, we all share the identity. What identity do we all share? The identity we share is that we choose to come together on a Sabbath morning at 10:30 and to study together. That's a part of our identity. And that's why somebody will say, oh, you belong to that group that meets online on Sabbath mornings. So they are identifying you by a certain characteristic. And they're not just identifying you now as a person, they're identifying you as a part of a group. And so you could say corporately, that maybe would not be too perfectly applicable, but you understand what I'm saying. Corporately, what makes us all similar is that we all choose to meet together 10:30 on a Sabbath morning. So that's our common identity. Now, that's just one part of it, because some of us are male, some are female. We're not corporate in that sense. Some of us are Americans, some are Jamaicans, and all over the world. We're not corporate in that sense. So some of us are one race, some of us are another race. We're not corporate in that sense. But we can find some, in terms of our meeting together on a Sabbath morning, we have a corporate identity. So, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it adds another element. Now look at this, and this is important. It says it is endowed by law. Look at the next phrase. With the rights and the liabilities. The rights and the liabilities of an individual. I think that's important. The rights and the liabilities of an individual. What does this phrase mean? The rights and the liabilities. It means that whatever right one has, everybody has the same right. And what about liabilities? It means that whatever shortcomings or disadvantages one has, everybody has those disadvantages. Now, I am acutely aware of this, and this is why, you know, sometimes one of the things that I believe, even in our WhatsApp group, is that everybody has the right to share his opinion. If one has the right, everybody has the right. So it's not right for me to say, Sister Mariana, you're free to talk. Sister Rose, you're not free to talk. That is not right. That's not fair. That is a law that would be unjust. And so Merriam-Webster points out that if we have corporate identity, then we should be, by law, we should have the same rights. But notice, we also should have the same liabilities. And I can understand this because I'm a Jamaican. And when the government goes and borrows money from the IMF and the whole country begins to suffer, I also suffer under that liability. So because you belong, because you're a part of it, whatever liabilities come upon the body, you also suffer it. If you're a Seventh-day Adventist and the Adventist church leaders go and give a medal to the Pope, or they become a part of the Ecumenical Council, you are a member, you're automatically implicated in what takes place because you're a member, you're part of the corporate group. So I just wanted to explain that. But let's go to the Bible here now, and we're going to proceed a little further with this idea of corporate identity. Look at what the Bible says in Hebrews 7 and verse 9. And it's talking about who was greater. Was it the Levitical priesthood, or was it the priesthood of Jesus Christ? That's what is being discussed here in Hebrews 7. But look at what Paul says. He lays down a principle that I want us to consider because he's talking about corporate identity. Look at what he says. And as I may so say, Levi also, who received tithes, paid tithes in Abraham. What he's showing is that Abraham paid tithe to Melchizedek. He's really talking about Melchizedek, right? He's showing when Abraham met Melchizedek. He says Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, and Levi also, who he received tithes. In other words, the Israelites paid tithes to Levi, and that suggests that Levi was a great priest. But he says Levi himself paid tithes to Melchizedek. Now, when tithes were paid by Abraham to Melchizedek, Levi was not even a thought in Abraham's mind, because Abraham had Jacob, and then Jacob had Levi. So when Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, Levi was somewhere in the genes of Abraham, way back in the genes of Abraham. But Paul says that Levi paid tithes when Abraham paid tithes, and he's operating on this principle of corporate identity. Even though Levi was not yet born, he's saying that Levi was a part of Abraham's existence. And so whatever Abraham did, Levi did it also in this sense of corporate identity. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. If there are any questions or clarifications needed, I will make sure that we have a few minutes at the end when we can respond to those questions. I think most of us might understand, but at least I want to emphasize it and go back over it, because as simple a matter as this might seem, it is vital to understanding what true Christianity is about. So, when we were looking back at what it says there in Wikipedia, it says it was to be endowed with the rights and the liabilities. So I want to go back. I want to look at that from the Bible and see where the Bible brings out that point. So let's go back to the Bible. And I want you to look at where the rights of one person fell upon another. Genesis 18 and verse 26. Look at what happens here. And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. Do you see the concept of corporate blessings? Everybody in Sodom is going to be saved. The wicked, the abominable, all the gays and the LGBTQI people in Sodom are going to be spared. Why? Because God finds 50 righteous in the city. There you find the concept of corporate identity. If you had enough righteous people in that city, God would have identified the whole city as a place that was qualified to be spared. The blessing of one person or of a few people would have fallen upon hundreds, maybe thousands of people, because that's the way corporate identity works. Your blessing falls upon the next person. That is why I believe that if I want my family to be blessed, it will help. It will help if I myself commit myself to God. In Jamaica, they have a little phrase that says, "What drop off a head, drop on shoulder. If it falls from your head, it will land on your shoulder." And it's the idea of corporate blessings. What blesses one person falls upon those who are in association with the person. So God expresses this idea here when he said he would have saved Sodom, not just for 50, it went down to 10. If there were 10 there, for the sake of 10 people, a wicked city would have been saved. So you see how the impact of one person can have an effect on all the others who are around him. God only knows how many people have been saved because you have been around, or your Christian group has been around. God only knows. In Genesis 26 and verse 24, look at what God says. It says, the Lord appeared unto him the same night, and he said, I am the God of Abraham thy father. He's speaking to Isaac. Fear not, for I am with thee, and I will bless thee and multiply thy seed. Why? For my servant Abraham's sake. There you see the principle again, brothers and sisters. I mean, sometimes you read these verses in the Bible and you're wondering, why does God do this? But it's a principle that he's highlighting. It's a principle. What drops off the head falls on the shoulder. So Abraham is to be blessed, and for his sake, because of Abraham, his progeny, his descendants become a part of Abraham's corporation, and they are blessed for Abraham's sake. A couple other places, Genesis 30 and verse 27. Look at what happens here between Laban and Jacob. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry. For I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for thy sake. Jacob was working with Laban, and Laban found out that just because Jacob was there, he was being blessed. Now, this is highlighting the point that corporate association, there was a way Jacob and Laban were associated. Jacob was Laban's nephew, but not only that, they were working together on the same project. And because of Jacob's involvement, Laban was being blessed. So this is how you see that corporate identity. You not only receive the blessings, but I'm going to show you also how you're going to receive the liabilities of that association. I'll come to that. But Genesis 39 and verse 9, again, another example. It came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Jacob's sake, for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. This man Potiphar, a heathen man, an Egyptian, a worshipper of false gods, his house was blessed. He was blessed. Why? Because a man of God came into fellowship with him, came into association with him. And his connection with this man brought blessings into his life. That's what we mean by corporate identity. Or that's one of the aspects or benefits or implications of corporate identity. But I want to point out that it works the other way also. Because look at this. Look at this. It's talking about Achan, the man who took the Babylonian garment into his tent. And it says, Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, the man who hid the gold and the silver and the garment and the wedge of gold. They took him, but look what happens next. And his sons and his daughters and his oxen and his donkeys, his asses and his sheep and his tent, my goodness, and all that he had. And they brought them unto the valley of Achor. And it tells you that. And all Israel stoned him with stones and burned them with fire after they had stoned them with stones. Now, I know we shake our heads when you look at this and you wonder, his sons and his daughters, what did they do? Their father's evil fell upon their head. Now, I'm not sure if they were a party to the deception. I'm not sure if they knew about it and didn't say anything. But I'm sure of something. His cows and his donkeys and his sheep did not know about it. Yet they were stoned as well. And as we continue in this series of studies, we are going to understand better why these things happen in the Old Testament. But I will just say briefly that, look here, when God has set up a teaching tool, everything in that lesson is perfect. Everything is in keeping with the principles of that teaching tool. If God is going to teach us about corporate identity and corporate accountability, it's going to happen. He's not going to break the pattern. One day when we go to eternity, we're going to find out whether Achan's sons and daughters will be saved. I don't know. But I know that what you see in the Old Testament is not the end of the story. Moses himself, as I point out, Moses had to be killed because he broke the law. He disrespected God. He died. God took him up into a mountain and God put him to death up there, God himself. And Moses was God's best friend. If God did that to Moses, he will do it to anybody. But you know what? The Bible shows us that it was not the end of the story, because Moses even appears in the New Testament talking to Jesus. Moses did not remain dead. God showed us what will happen in eternity. Even some of those who died under judgment in the old covenant are going to come back to life and live forever. But in the old covenant, it was a lesson, it was a teaching tool. And what God was teaching us here with Achan and his entire household was the concept of corporate identity. This is why God says in the fourth commandment, look here, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon what? Upon the children, to the third and the fourth generation of them that hate me. Corporate identity, corporate accountability. There's a blessing in association. There's also a curse in association. And it happens several times. Look at this. I'm just going to read one more and then I'll move on. Thus said the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek and destroy all that they have and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. Wow. I want to point out to you, for those of you who don't know, This was 400 years after they came out of Egypt. 400 years later. And God comes to Saul and God says, I remember what Amalek did to Israel. 400 years later, American citizens, 400 years ago, America didn't even exist as a country. 400 years ago, you don't know your ancestors. My ancestors were in Africa and China and India 400 years ago. What do I know about what my ancestor did 400 years ago? But you can see the principle. The descendants 400 years later are still the same people. The corporate accountability is being taught here clearly in the Bible. Now, hopefully we will understand this better as we proceed. But first of all, I want to make the point that it is a clear biblical teaching, this idea of corporate identity. Now, let me go on to explain the legal reasons for this kind of identity. Let me point out that there is a legal aspect to this accountability. Why are you accountable? There's a legal aspect to it. Legal accountability means that you are entitled to inheritance, right? Why is it that when you die, your children get what belongs to you? By law. Or when your parents die, you get what they have left behind. By law, you're entitled to it. This principle of corporate accountability, it exists not just in the Bible, but it exists in our society. Why is it that if the police catch you in a car where everybody has drugs and you had nothing to do with it, why is it that you end up in jail too? Because you are implicated by your association. That's why they say birds of a feather flock together. That's why they say a man is known by the company that he keeps. There is a legal implication that is based on common sense. That if you mingle with a certain set of people, it means that you think alike. It means that you have things in common with those people. And because of this, the law will make that association and will put you in a default place where it assumes that you are guilty. Not only are you entitled to inheritance, but if I die and leave some debts behind, the people who inherit whatever I have, they are also going to be responsible for my debts. They have to pay my debts. They have to take care of they get the good, but they also get the bad. That's the point I'm making. And as I pointed out, you are implicated by association, the people that you mix with. You automatically get tied up with those people. And this is what we mean. This is a part of the whole aspect of corporate identity. Now, why am I going through all of this in such detail? Because there are some people who will deny that such a thing exists. They will say it is unfair, it is unreasonable. How could God identify us with what is bad or with people who are bad? But I'm trying to show you that it's not only God, it exists where human beings exist. And you can see that there is a logical reason for doing it. And as we continue to examine a little bit more, you will see why. Now, I put this sign up there because I want to make the point. Be careful of the group that you put yourself in. Because corporate identity is important. And I know I might be cutting our own throat when I say this. But remember, you have groups that are beneficial and you have groups that are harmful. And I'm hoping that by God's grace, this group is beneficial, that by entering this group, you will obtain blessings and not curses. But still at the same time, it is a thing to remember that you are implicated by your associations. So when you're becoming a part of something, enter at your own risk, because you're going to, what drops off the head will drop on the shoulder. You are going to be benefited or cursed based on your associations. Your corporate identity will bless you or will hurt you. Maybe it will do both, but it will do more of one. So why are you implicated if you belong to the group? Well, let's look at some other reasons. We saw that there's a legal implication, but look at some other reasons. First of all, genetic identity. I know that genetically I belong to the tribe of Clayton. It's interesting, my children have made a little WhatsApp group, my sons, Annalie, Dave, Daniel, and Angie. And they have labeled the group, I'm not a part of the group, but they call it Tribe of David, which is kind of, it gives you an idea that they believe that they have an identity. And that identity is their genetics. They all belong to the same genetic identity. And so they have formed themselves into a group, and I'm going to tell you, they are so closely knit in that group that any problem that comes upon one, it comes upon all. And any benefit comes upon one, it comes upon all. And this is based on the genetic identity. And what does that do? Not only does it give you the same nature, similar nature, they kind of resemble each other, but they kind of behave alike and think alike. So that gives them a genetic identity. And so you could almost safely say, if one of you is guilty, the other one is there. The other one is guilty too. You know, interestingly, a few years ago, somebody broke into our campsite. It's way out in the bush. And we had some guys working there, doing some work on the place. And one of them was a thief. And after the work was over, he came back with some of his friends and a truck, and he stole the solar system, and he stole lawnmower and all kinds of things, and they took off. Anyway, Brother Howard was able to do some detective work, and he was able to find who did it, and he got the police, and he went for them. Went for one of them that they were able to identify. And while they were questioning this guy to find who was involved, again they found somebody who knew this guy well. And the person said, look here, if he's involved, then you can go to such and such a person because he's involved too. People know him so well that they know that anything he's doing, he has a friend who will be involved too. And the police went to the home of that friend, and they found equipment from the camp at home. He wasn't there. The police had no suspicion of him. But just because he was friends with the other guy, they went for him. And when they went there, they found all the evidence that he was a part of the robbery. So the point I'm making is that birds of a feather flock together. And when you have a genetic identity that is the same, it's worse. You not only have the similar habits and like to be around each other, but you're also you have inborn tendencies to behave the same way. Then you have cultural identity, same mentality. All right? I won't even begin to talk about that, but I can tell you that the behavior of the Indians is different from the behavior of the Africans. And even in Africa, you have the people in South Africa behave differently from the people in Kenya. I went there a couple of times and I saw that so strikingly. You can almost tell which part a person comes from by being around them a little bit. Same thing in America. You go to America and the people in New York are very different from the people in California, very different from the people in Texas. And then you can break it down further. But at the same time, you have a common American mentality. All right, there are some things they talk about a lot that you don't hear other people talking about. You see them always talking about the American Constitution and that kind of thing, and they talk about for the good of America. They are more nationalistic than maybe most places in the world. Anyway, but you have the same kind of mentality. When I was in America, I discovered that it was almost like cursing a bad word to use the word nigger. I was in a place with another brother, a white guy, and there was another white guy who came in, and he was talking about doing something, and he used the word nigger. And my friend looked at me like he thought I was going to blow up. It's nothing to me. I'm not American. I'm a Jamaican. I have no idea what the fuss is about. And for me, it's nothing. But for an American, it's like the end of the world if somebody calls you a nigger. It's nothing to me. Our culture is different. We don't have that same kind of mentality. So you have cultural identity that people see you and they know where you are. And that's a part of your identity. And that's another reason why you are implicated. Like people will say, Jamaicans make trouble everywhere they go. All right? You're implicated. Why? Because you're a Jamaican. Not because you have done anything, but by association, you are identified. So you have your own individual identity, but you belong to the group. And by belonging to the group, it gives you a common aura. And of course, you have the national identity. I touched on that already, which means you have the same kind of attitude. And the last thing is that you have historic identity. It means you have a similar behavior. You know, God said, go and wipe out Amalek. Go and destroy Amalek. 400 years later, you know what the problem was? You know what the real problem was? Amalek had not changed. The same attitude of hatred for Israel, the same thing that made them attack Israel from the rear. 400 years ago, the people had the same kind of behavior, same attitude. And so when God says, I remember what they did, God is actually saying, nothing has changed. It's the same. And that is why a person is implicated for his corporate identity. These are some of the reasons. Now, let me go back to my Bible briefly. We see all of this brought out in the Bible. In 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 17, look at what it says. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. What is this talking about? It's talking about spiritual genetics. You are in Christ, you have been born again, you have become a new creature. It's like I was born Jamaican, or I was born a Clayton. That's my genetics. But when if it were possible for me to be born again physically, I could change my identity. You know, some people believe in reincarnation, which we know is nonsense. But according to their idea, I am Clayton today. There was a man who used to live a few miles away from here. He told my father, he became friends with my father, and he said to my father, he finally discovered why they were such good friends, because there was an affinity between them. Because in a previous life, he was a Roman centurion and my father was something else. And the both of them had some kind of relationship way back 2,000 years ago. So he discovered why they were friends, which is absolute rubbish. But at least what I'm saying is it presents a concept of how you could be born again physically. But this is not what the Bible is saying at all. You become a new creature because spiritually you have received a new spiritual DNA. So you become a new creation. Old things are passed away and all things are become new. So the Bible teaches us that there is a way to receive a new identity. And I want to point out, I'm going to say it now in case I forget. This new identity that you receive is a corporate identity. Just as how corporately I'm a Jamaican, corporately I'm a Clayton, corporately I'm a preacher, because you have many who are in my category. Corporately, you can have many different connections that fit you into a certain category. When somebody says, there's a person who likes to say that all preachers are thieves because they're only eating people's tithe money. I don't say much in those conversations because I'm a preacher, and I know that I have never, in my 40 years of preaching, I've never ever said to one person, send me money, and I've never said I'm lacking and I need money. Never. And I would die before I ever say it, which is why I don't preach about tithes and offerings, because people might misunderstand. But the point is, by being a preacher, the accusations fall on me. Okay? So it's just an example of how when you are in a certain category, you can be blamed, you can be implicated, as well as you can be you can be blessed as well as you can be cursed. But by belonging to a category, more so if you choose to be in that category, more so if you are in the category and you can't get out, then you have this implication. Now you can get in by being born. That's one way, and the Bible points out that this happens. You can also get in, the Bible uses another word. It says, having predestinated us, Ephesians 1 and verse 5. Having predestinated us unto the adoption of children by Jesus Christ. So you can be born, or and it also uses the phrase of being adopted, because that's another way you can obtain identity. You identified, you are adopted into a family. You may not have the genetics, but still you become entitled to the benefits and the liabilities because you are legally a part of that family, even if genetically you didn't make it. The third way that the Bible identifies is through citizenship. In Colossians 1 and verse 13, it says, who hath delivered us from the power of darkness and hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son. The kingdom you belong to brings benefits and liabilities. I know one of the things that happens is that in America, people are afraid of the IRS man. They don't want to be visited by the IRS. They don't want to be audited by the IRS. I mean, when I live in a little country like Jamaica, I don't feel the same kind of fear because nobody is coming to my house to inquire about taxes. The system is different here. I know there almost everything is taxed. One time I opened an account so I could receive US funds because people were supporting and they were sending money. And at one point, the IRS in America wrote me a letter to ask me to send in my tax returns. Of course, you know, I don't have to do this because I'm not an American, but they found that I had an account in US dollars and they wrote to me. So just by having some US dollars, I was in danger of experiencing the liabilities that Americans have to go through. But there are also the benefits of America, which makes a lot of Jamaicans want to go and live there, where you get to live in a place where it seems like everything is available and you live a comfortable lifestyle. And some of the third world disadvantages that we have here, you don't face them. So this comes with the kingdom. So once you belong in a kingdom, this corporate identity, this is another way you can experience the benefits and the liabilities of the kingdom. So what really matters, brothers and sisters, what really matters is the kingdom that you belong to. So we obtain identity as we just saw by being born. We obtain our nature. By being adopted, we obtain our family. By obtaining citizenship, that's how we obtain our national identity. And all of these things have to do with our identity as Christians. You know that's where I'm going. Now, the last thing I want to look at, my time is almost up. I want to look at choice. One of the accusations that people have brought against our ministry, our teachings, and when I say our, I'm talking to all of you as a part of this corporate identity. I'm assuming that most of us here believe the same thing. And most people, well, a lot of people have said that what we are doing is taking away the primary element of the Christian life, because we are focusing on your corporate identity. I'm saying that what is important is which kingdom you belong to, which family you belong to, which nation you belong to, and that this is the thing that determines whether you are blessed or whether you are cursed. These other people say, no, that is not true, because there's no way that somebody else can make decisions and somebody else can do something and you are disadvantaged by it. They say it's not fair. And so they say all that matters is your personal choice. You alone, you can choose. And based on your choice, you are either blessed or you are cursed. You are either saved or you are lost. I think most of us, like myself, believed this for most of my life. And that's why I'm going through this morning, because I want us to understand that this is not the biblical understanding. Choice is involved, but we have to understand what choice? What choice? We are free to choose, but free to choose how and free to choose what? That's the important question. First of all, let us get this right. Let us get this. Satan has a legal right to those who are a part of his kingdom. Let me highlight legal right. Satan has a legal right to those who are a part of his kingdom. Remember, we saw at the beginning that there are two divisions to the universe. There is a part where God is, and there's a part where God is feared and he's not in control. That is Satan's kingdom. And those who are in that kingdom, Satan has a legal right to them. So what can we understand from this? Our rights depend on where we are, not who we are, but where we are. And I'll give you an example. I am a Jamaican. I am a Christian. I go to America and I break the speed limit. Do you think they're going to say I'm a Jamaican? So they're not going to charge me in America? What rights do I have? Can I say I'm a Jamaican, I have the right to be not prosecuted here? No. My rights depend on where I am. I know somebody who renounced his US citizenship. And he said he didn't have to pay taxes, and he didn't have to have a driver's license, and he didn't have to, his car didn't have to be licensed, and he was driving down the road without a license, without a license plate, and the police stopped him. And he said something like, I am a citizen of the world, I'm not subject to these laws. Look, they took him down to the jail just the same. What he said didn't matter. Your rights depend on where you are. If you are in America, the rights that you have depend on the state of America. If you are in Jamaica, same thing. It depends on the laws of Jamaica. And whichever group you belong to, you don't go to a group and you impose your individuality there. You live by the group that you are in. An important point to remember. They don't depend on our personal ideas. We can choose our kingdom. This is where choice comes in, brothers and sisters. This is where choice comes in. You can choose your kingdom. Free to choose what? You can choose your kingdom, but you can't choose your rights. If you are in kingdom A, you're entitled to certain privileges and rights in that kingdom. If you are in kingdom B, you will live by the principles of that kingdom. Do you understand where we are going? And do you understand why this is so important? Because it reveals and it manifests an understanding of the way of salvation and the state of salvation and what we need to choose. What choices do we have? We can choose our kingdom, but it can't choose our rights. The rights go along with the kingdom. You may put it this way: you can cast your vote, and whatever you get, you take. All right, America, let me put it in the context of America. Joe Biden or Donald Trump? I don't know. As a Jamaican, it looks like it's the devil and the deep blue sea. But anyway, if you vote for Joe Biden, once you have voted, don't complain, because anything you get, you take. You're not going to vote for Joe Biden and then tell him what he's to stand for. Same thing with Donald Trump. You're not going to vote for Donald Trump and then you tell him what he must do. No. When you have voted in Republican or Democrat, you take what you get. You choose your sides and then you take what you get. And I am applying all this to salvation and our kingdom and the conflict that is taking place in the universe. We can cast our vote, we can choose our sides, but you don't determine what happens in those kingdoms. Once you are in the kingdom of light, your privileges are automatic. Your liabilities are automatic. You know you're going to be attacked by the devil automatically. You know he's going to slander you and say bad things and try to destroy you. That goes with the kingdom. Choose your kingdom, and if you know if you're going to Satan's kingdom, you can prosper in this world. You can go along on an easy ride, but you know that you're going to become more and more evil, and at the end, you're going to end up in eternal death. You don't get the right to choose what happens. You know, if you're in God's kingdom, your life is going to become more and more holy. If you are in the other kingdom, you're going to become more and more evil. You don't get the right to choose what happens in each kingdom. You just get the right to choose your kingdom. When you understand that, you won't try so much to improve yourself. You'll try to make the right choice. Because when you have made the right choice, the improvement will follow, or the degradation will follow. And you know, I should really say this a little differently, because we are all born into the wrong kingdom. What we have a choice is to choose the right one. We're already in the wrong one. So that one choice is really the choice to choose the right kingdom. So remember, this is how sin exists. There are the two places. You get to choose your kingdom. In one kingdom, God is all and God is in all. This is the kingdom all of us have theoretically chosen. If we have really chosen this kingdom, if we have really committed ourselves to our God and to our Savior, this is our truth. God is all and God is in all. The other side, God is feared and God is avoided. You don't have a choice. You can only choose to get out of the right kingdom and into the left one. Why a corporate system? I think this is my last point. I'm a little over time. Why did God set up the universe? Let me go back to the question. Why did God set up the universe to run this way? Because God could have made it differently. That's one of the questions that comes to mind. Why set up a system where if one person does something, those around him inherit it? Why? Couldn't God have done something different? Why did this planet Earth fall under the corporate condemnation when Adam chose to sin? Because that's what we are really looking at. We are looking at Adam's sin, and it came upon all men. The issue, first of all, brothers and sisters, was a system of governance. Let's understand that. I'm going to express this a little more clearly in a moment. It needed a nation to settle the questions. You have different forms of government. I see you, Sister Tiffany. I'll let you go in a moment. We have different kinds of government. You have democracy, dictatorship. I didn't know there were so many of them. Monarchy, totalitarianism, aristocracy, theocracy, and all of those. There are different forms of government, and the question is, what kind of government is best for the universe? That's the question. How do you answer the question of which government is best? You need a nation of people. You need a group of people to demonstrate your government. One person won't do. This issue involves the human race, not just Adam. Adam sins, God allows Adam to die, or God puts Adam to death. Nothing is settled because one man cannot demonstrate the efficacy of a government. One man can be what we call an anomaly. It can be just an accident with one person, or you can't really see very well from the life of one person. So when Adam sinned, why didn't God stop it there? One of the reasons was that it needed a race of people. It needed a nation of people to demonstrate the government that really works. One person could not do this. And so from the beginning, it was about who governs the universe. And from the beginning, God knew that only his government would lead to happiness. So when Satan challenged God's government, God had to demonstrate which government is better. So what he did was, when man fell, God allowed Satan to have access to a race of people. And everything depended on the race, not the individual. That's why God made it operate on the basis of a corporate system. We, the church, are that race. And the final point, we are lost as a group, as a nation, and we are saved as a group, or we are saved as a nation. I'm going to read one Bible verse and then I'm going to stop because I want to just tie together the reason why I've looked at this today. The Bible says in Romans chapter 5, 2 verses, verse 12, by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. And so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. The Bible says one man sinned, and the corporate consequences fell upon all men. We're part of that family. We're part of that nation. We're a part of that race. We suffered the liabilities that Adam brought, not upon himself, but upon his entire race. That's what I've been trying to emphasize today in looking at this corporate identity. And if you go down to verses 18 and 19, look at what it says. Therefore, as by the offense of one, judgment came upon all men to condemnation. It's this corporate identity. Even so, by the righteousness of one, the free gift came upon all men unto justification of life. You can choose your nation. You can choose the man. You were born in the nation of Adam. You can choose the nation of Christ, but you can't choose the rules by which your nation lives. Once you belong to the nation, the rules of Adam apply, or the rules of Christ apply. It depends upon which nation you choose. As by one man's disobedience, many were made sinners. You didn't make yourself sinner. You didn't become a sinner because you broke the law. You became a sinner because your grandparent sinned and you were a part of that corporate body. It fell upon, it dropped off the head, it fell upon the shoulder. You were the shoulder, you got it. So by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous. Hallelujah. Same principle. It falls on the head of Christ, it drops on his shoulder. You are the shoulder. By his obedience, you are made righteous. Not by your obedience, not by your works, not by your righteousness, but because it falls on his head and it drops on his shoulder, which is you. So this is the bottom line of all that I've been trying to say today. I've been trying to get us to see, or to get to the place where we can understand the basis of salvation. This is what this is about. And we will explore this further and further in subsequent weeks. But I'm going to stop here for today. And I want to thank you all for being a part of this fellowship and study.